After weeks of leftist mob violence, character assassination, chaos, and lawlessness, Election Day is finally upon us. You might not know that if you're one of the countless conservatives who has been banned from Twitter and Facebook for posting jokes or articles or really any other silly excuse that tickles the big tech censors' fancy. But if you are listening to this show, go out and vote. Do it for Brett. Do it for your country. Do it for the California deserts that demand to be bathed in leftist tears. If you're a conservative, a Republican, or a right-leaning independent, go vote today. And if you're a Democrat, do not forget to go vote tomorrow. I'm Michael Knowles, and this is The Michael Knowles Show. It's Election Day, and you better be looking good at the polls. They've got record high turnout being reported, and the one way that I can promise you that you will look good is if you keep your hair. We got to thank Keeps. Because they can really help you. Listen, take it from me. I am not an Adonis of a man, okay? I'm perfectly man enough to admit that. I'm not a Hulk. I'm not a Hercules. One thing I've always had going for me, though, when talking to the lovely ladies of this world, is that I've got a big poofy head of hair. Do you know that hair loss can start when you're 25, 30, 35 years old? You can stop that. You can use clinically proven ways to stop that for just $1 a day or less than $1 a day for just 5 minutes, barely anything, but you got to start now. There are 2 clinically proven medications that help you keep your hair. They're inexpensive, they're easy to get, and Keeps will get it to you. It's very easy to sign up, takes less than 5 minutes. Just answer a few questions, snap some photos. A licensed doctor remotely reviews your information, recommends the right treatment for you, all without you ever leaving your couch. It offers 2 versions of the only 2, or generic versions rather, of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products out there. You might have tried them before, you've never gotten them this easy for this price. $10 to $35 a month. Anywhere from 33 cents a day to $1 a day, and you'll get your first month free. Quite a deal to help you keep your hair. No reason to put this off any longer. Stop hair loss today, I'm telling you. You know, when you lose your hair, a good-looking guy can really stop looking great, so do it. Right now, go to keeps.com/Covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E, KEEPS.com/Covfefe. That's a free month of treatment at KEEPS.com/Covfefe, C-O-V-F-E-F-E. Keeps, hair today, hair tomorrow. And then you'll be looking really good at the polls today. I have been told from my various sources around the country that there is record high turnout. I wake up to a call from my grandmother today in New York. New York doesn't usually get crazy turnout because it's a one-party town. And she says she's never seen anything like it in 50, 60 years. Just people pouring in to the polls. Who knows which side they're for. Some of them looked like they were shaved and had jobs and combed their hair, so we can assume that they're going for Republicans. And then others were screeching and had purple hair and were, screaming in Aramaic and Latin, so we can assume that they're voting for Democrats. The most important thing that you've got to remember today on Election Day, vote Republican. I know that doesn't sound nice. That sounds partisan. It's not just about ideas. You're right. It's Election Day. Election Day is when we take ideas and we put them into action. There are 2 parties in this country. There are 2 parties. The Republican Party, it's not that it's always perfect. It's not that it's ever perfect. It's not that the Democrat Party is always evil or that it's the worst thing ever in the history of the world. But there are 2 parties and 2 ideas. Conservatives have a home in the Republican Party. Leftists have a home in the Democrat Party. The parties have become more polarized in recent years. This is largely a good thing. A major complaint in the 1930s and 40s among political scientists was that the parties were indistinguishable, that you couldn't tell which party was which. Now you can. If you support on any basic issue, if you support law and order, you vote for Republicans. If you support open borders and undermining immigration law, you vote for Democrats. If you support jobs, you vote for Republicans. If you support mobs, you vote for Democrats, as the president has driven home. If you support our American flag, if you support the symbol of our country, you vote for Republicans. If you protest our American flag, if you don't like our American flag, if you don't like our country, which that flag symbolizes, you vote for Democrats. If you want freedom, you vote for Republicans. If you want socialist slavery taken over the healthcare system, you vote for Democrats. It's just that simple. We like to speak in ideas, in philosophy, in ideologies, and okay, that's very nice. It's very nice to speak about ideas purely. We can bandy about ideas all day long. But in a representative democracy where you can participate in your government, those ideas need to collapse into real actions, real behaviors, real institutions, real political parties, real candidates. And that happens on a day called Election Day, when you go and you vote. That's what you should do. And I have a strategy. If there are no Republicans to vote for, look, I live in California. I live in La La Land, where, you know, it's only Democrats or communists or Democratic communists. I think those are the three options we have out here. So for certain races, they don't even have a Republican or an independent running. They've only got a Democrat and a socialist. In that case, write in Brett Kavanaugh. That's what you need to do. That's what I did. I voted. We're going to see if there's a wave in California. If there's a Kavanaugh wave, then Brett is going to have to step down from the Supreme Court and become the dog walker in Pasadena or something like that. Because I think you've got to send a message. Go out there. Don't give them an inch. We are winning. You should not back off when we're winning. We'll see what happens. Historically speaking, Democrats should take the House tonight and should take it by a lot. But my gut tells me that might not happen. The reason I bring Kavanaugh up, the reason that I write in Brett Kavanaugh, and why I say you should write in Brett Kavanaugh when there's not a candidate that you want to vote for, is that the Kavanaugh experience, the Kavanaugh nomination process, tells you every reason why you've got to vote for Republicans right now. Because the Democrats are lawless. There were lynch mobs going after this guy, trying to ruin his career, undermine the constitutional order, undermine a duly elected president's right to appoint his own judges. And just this weekend, Chuck Grassley from the Senate Judiciary Committee released the findings of an investigation into all of those accusers. And it's about 400 pages long, a little more than that. If you didn't read it, I can sum it up for you. All the accusations were bunk. That's basically what you need to know about it. We'll get into detail a little bit, but that's what you need to know. Bunk. Thorough bunk. Conspiracies from Democrats, from the left, from left-wing law firms. People are now being recommended for criminal investigations because of their participation in the disgusting slander of Brett Kavanaugh. That's what's on the stake. That's what's on the ballot. The people who did that smear against Brett Kavanaugh, they're the ones running for office as Democrats right now. You can either vote for them or you can vote against them. So there's a new poll out from Harvard which shows that the majority of men and women think that Democrats did not actually care about women during the Kavanaugh smear campaign. Of course, we knew this to be true. I knew that. I knew Democrats don't care about Christine Ford or Julie Swetnick or whatever happened in a broom closet in 1982. Of course, I think we all knew that. But what this poll shows is that it's the majority of both American men and women. What the Democrats thought was that if they went after Kavanaugh in that way, if they accused him of sex crimes in the early 80s, then even if they didn't gain any votes among men, they would gain some votes among women. Actually, the opposite happened. And this is not a Republican-Democrat thing. This is not a left-right thing. The majority of Americans, men and women, believe that the Democrats were exploiting these women, acting politically, acting cynically, that they didn't really care about these women. So a big takeaway from this Grassley report: no evidence to substantiate any of the claims made against Kavanaugh. There is no evidence. Any of the claims. That means Christine Ford, any version of the story that she presented, that in 82 or 83 or 84, either 2 or 3 or 4 guys attacked her in a room that was next to her house or 20 minutes away from her house, and she was afraid of spaces and then not afraid of closed spaces, and then afraid to fly, and then not afraid to fly. Any of the stories, whichever one you choose to believe, put it on a dartboard, throw a dart at it. There is no evidence to substantiate those claims, no evidence to substantiate the claims that Brett Kavanaugh whipped it out at a party freshman year at Yale. No, that was another one, Debbie Ramirez's allegation. No evidence that Julie Swetnick or Michael Avenatti had some accusation against, or had a credible accusation against Brett Kavanaugh from other parties around Georgetown Prep. No evidence about any of it. So the Grassley report also shows the changing storyline that Christine Ford had. The storyline changed constantly. We knew that. People who were paying attention knew that. I think people on the left, people who didn't want an originalist judge on the court, tried to pretend that the storyline wasn't changing, but it did. A key aspect of this, though, is that in her testimony, Christine Ford said that because of the alleged attack in 82 or 84, whenever it was, she struggled academically. She struggled academically for 4 to 6 years afterward, had trouble socializing, didn't have a lot of friends, couldn't go to parties, couldn't get her work done in college. This has been contradicted by people who knew her in high school and college. One, there's no evidence that she struggled at all afterward in high school. None whatsoever. But so then she makes the claim about college. There was a classmate of hers who said that she had a lot of friends in college, that she frequently went to parties, that she frequently went to frat parties, that she wasn't afraid of closed spaces, that she wasn't afraid of drinking or chugging beers with the bros or whatever they did in college, that she was doing all of that, and that she wasn't afraid to be in a room with boys. Now, do we believe this guy who's saying that he saw her do all these things during her freshman and sophomore year of college? I don't know. I have just as much a reason to believe him as I have a reason to believe Christine Ford. Another thing that came out of the Grassley report, 2 boys say that they may have, now they're grown men, at the time they were boys, said that they may have been the person that Christine Ford was talking about and not Brett Kavanaugh. So they don't describe what she described, but they describe events that could be similar and could be interpreted that way. One of them said that a kiss happened in the bedroom of a house which was about 15 to 20-minute walk from the Van Ness metro station, which is about in the vicinity that she describes, that Dr. Ford was wearing a swimsuit under her clothing, and that the kissing ended when a friend jumped on the bed as a joke. Now, an important distinction here is that, according to this friend, she initiated the kiss. But a lot of similar details here. The friend jumping on the bed, the swimsuit, the party. Does this mean that Christine Ford is lying? Not necessarily. She could just get it mixed up. People mix up their memories all the time, especially when they're drinking, especially 30 years after the fact. Another guy says that it could have been him that she was talking about, that he made out with a girl that he thinks could have been Christine Ford at a party around the same time, around the same place, and both of these guys apparently look like Brett Kavanaugh. Okay, that's fine. The Senate Judiciary Committee asked Christine Ford's attorney to respond to this. No response. No response at all, because Christine Ford said she wouldn't pursue the accusations any further. Because why would she? Why would they pursue? This was always about preventing an originalist judge from getting on the court. And now that he got on the court, okay, we don't want any more attention on this. There's some inconsistencies being pointed out in our story, so we're going to back off a little bit. Another finding from this report, the media reported that Leland Kaiser, that was the longtime best friend, or close friend rather, of Christine Ford, that she said she'd never met Brett Kavanaugh. According to media reports, Leland Kaiser then said she felt pressure from Christine Ford and her attorneys to change her story, to not refute Christine Ford, even though she did refute Christine Ford because she said that she never met Brett Kavanaugh. Another aspect of this, we heard famously in all of this that Brett Kavanaugh likes beer, and he still likes beer. And do you like beer, Senator? Sometimes you drank too much, okay? So we know that he likes beer, but Christine Ford kept saying, I had 1 beer at the party. And I will just tell you something. As a guy who's been to a couple parties, went to college, whenever somebody says, I had 1 beer, they had more than 1 beer. That's what it means. If you look up I had 1 beer in the dictionary, it means I had a lot of beer. You say, what are you talking about, officer? I just had 1 beer. What seems to be the officer problem? They definitely had more than 1 beer. And so friends of Christine Ford said that she would go to these parties a lot and drink. I'm not knocking her for it. A lot of people do that in college and high school. And at the time, I think the drinking age was 18, or it had just been changed. So just pointing out an apparent inconsistency. So one of the accusations against Kavanaugh is that he whipped it out at a party in college his freshman year. It turns out that there was another notorious flasher at Yale at the time that Kavanaugh was there. This is according to classmates who were there at the time. So there was this notorious flasher who was not Brett Kavanaugh. And as the classmate said, if it were Brett Kavanaugh, trust me, we would have known. The word would have gotten around, but it was not him. And I think I pointed this out at the time when we were talking about Kavanaugh, that Yale is a very naked school. There's a lot of streaking and there are things like this. It's a very naked place. I don't know what to tell you. But it appears that this was not Brett Kavanaugh by the best evidence that we have at our disposal. So then this brings us to Michael Avenatti. Basta, the former future president, former future Democrat nominee for president, Michael Avenatti. His client, Julie Swetnick, apparently, this is the weirdest one of all. So there's good evidence now that Swetnick and Avenatti criminally conspired to make materially false statements. She's the one who said that Kavanaugh would host gang rape parties, and she saw him gang rape girls all the time, and for some reason she kept going to these parties. That part was never explained. He said, why don't you tell somebody? Why don't you call the cops? No, I just kept going. I figured they'd get better after the 6th or 7th gang rape party that Brett Kavanaugh hosted. So they're now being investigated for criminally conspiring to make materially false statements. Julie Swetnick, Michael Avenatti's client, apparently, according to this report, has a long history of making sexual harassment, legal threats, lawsuits, claims. And during those threats and lawsuits and accusations was represented by Deborah Katz, the same lawyer who represented Christine Ford, who was recommended to Ford by Dianne Feinstein. Is this starting to smell to anybody? Is this not? It doesn't smell very good, does it? That's quite a coincidence, isn't it? Quite a coincidence. And then finally, there was a claim by an ex-boyfriend of Christine Ford that Christine Ford coached a friend of hers on how to take a polygraph test and beat it. That friend was a former FBI agent, Monica McLean. The Ford team denied it. Apparently now, Monica McLean is being investigated for this claim. They might have changed some statements. They might be backing off that denial. So it's entirely possible that this ex-boyfriend is right, that Christine Ford did coach Monica McLean on how to beat a polygraph test, which means that she perjured herself before the Senate Judiciary Committee when she said she never coached anybody on how to beat a polygraph test. She might seem to know a lot about polygraph tests, which makes her volunteering to take a polygraph all that more suspect. Add this to all of the contradictions in her testimony. She said she had to tell her whole life story. The polygraph test took forever. The polygraph test in reality was 2 questions. She volunteered to do it. She said she's afraid of flying. She flies all over God's green earth. She said that she got a second door on the front of her house because she was so afraid of being in enclosed spaces from this assault. She got the second door on the house years before the issue of a sexual assault ever came up. She said it came up in 2012 when she talked about it to her marriage therapist. Actually, they put in the request to build the door 4 years earlier so that she could have a separate office and so that they could rent out the room to Google interns and college interns. It all adds up to no credibility whatsoever. And this is why you got to do it for Brett today. You got to go out on election day for Brett, because all of this stuff was treated as though it were gospel truth. This woman of unimpeachable integrity, how dare you point out that her story doesn't add up? How dare you point out the contradictions? How dare you question Michael Avenatti or Julie Swetnick or any of these other people? He has been slandered as a rapist, Brett Kavanaugh. His family has been destroyed. He's been dragged through the mud, all for what? To protect the sacrament of abortion, the left's sacrament of abortion, to protect Roe versus Wade. That's what it's all about. And that it's so dirty how they played, and they're so full of it, that I really hope that we see conservative voters, reasonable, independent voters, go out there and say, no more. This is too much. It's too despicable. We're not going to let this happen. Because if they are rewarded for this kind of behavior, you're only going to see more of it. So you may have noticed that I'm back on Twitter. Before I explain to you how I got back on Twitter, let me tell you about software advice. Software advice is when you're dealing with a real head scratcher, you should have your go-to person to call. This is a no-brainer, and it's why I got to tell you about it. Software advice, when you're working for a small business or a startup, or you're starting one yourself, you need a lot of software just to get the business off the ground. And you probably don't exactly know what you should be looking for. It can be extremely costly if you make a mistake. It obviously wastes your time. It wastes a lot of your employees' time, and that's time that you don't have when you're starting a company. Right now, get your own advisors that will point you in the right direction, get you working more efficiently right away. Go to softwareadvice.com/Knowles, Knowles. How much does it cost? It's absolutely free. Don't say I never did nothing for you. You'll be connected with an advisor to discuss the best software options for your need. It takes just 10 minutes or less. If you're a medical professional, construction manager, HR pro, you name it, software advice will save you time and help you make a more informed decision. If you're an entrepreneur or work solo, software advice is a great way to get an expert opinion even without the resources of a big company. Go to softwareadvice.com/Knowles to get started. End the software struggle today. Softwareadvice.com/Knowles, Knowles. Connect to an advisor for free. Softwareadvice.com. twitter.com/Knowles. I'm back on Twitter. I know. Well, technically, maybe I'm not back on Twitter. You might have seen, if you're following me on Twitter at Michael J. Knowles, you'll see that my new name on Twitter is definitely not Michael Knowles, because I'm afraid I know that they're going to kick me off again eventually. The way that I got back on Twitter is, I was kicked off basically because Donald Jr. retweeted a criticism that I had made of CNN, and it was so widely shared that they kicked me off. And they used as an excuse a joke I made about the election, in which I said Democrats should vote on Wednesday. And so they said, they removed the post immediately. And then when I tried to log into Twitter, they had this screen and it said, you can appeal your suspension or you can remove the post and waive your right to an appeal. So I said, okay, I'm going to appeal it. Because actually in my post, I said, make sure you vote in this poll on whether Twitter should kick off conservatives for joking. So it wasn't even the joke that they thought it was. It was actually a punchline about Twitter censoring conservatives. So I said, I'm going to appeal that. So I appealed my suspension. Guess what I heard back from them? I'll give you nothing. I heard nothing back, and they wouldn't respond. And so it's an indefinite Twitter suspension that I had, and I really didn't want to be off for election night. So they'd already removed the post, and what they want you to do is waive your right to an appeal. I'm not getting an appeal anyway. So I clicked it, and they reinstated me right away. But I've talked to a lot of my friends. Owen Benjamin was here yesterday. It's only a matter of time. Eventually, they will kick me off. This is why I vigorously defended Alex Jones when he was kicked off of Twitter. Not because I watched the Alex Jones show. He might be conspiratorial. He might be a shirtless vitamin salesman. He might think that the freaking frogs are gay. I don't know. But they kicked Alex Jones off to establish the principle to kick off Gavin McInnes or Owen Benjamin. They got to kick off Alex Jones because he's a conspiracy theorist. Then they got to kick off Gavin and Owen and other people because they're comedians. So they push things too far. They say things that are outrageous. They say things that are offensive. That's their job. They're comedians. So they kick them off. And we say, oh, well, they did, they said an offensive thing. They shouldn't have done that. Okay. Then they kick those guys off to kick me off. That's why, to kick me off. And how are they going to get away with kicking me off? Well, because I don't have the single fastest growing conservative podcast in the country. Probably got it's top 3 maybe, but it's not the fastest growing, I'm sorry to say. And so they can kick off people who don't have 1 million followers. Let's say they have 100,000 followers or 80,000 followers or whatever. They can kick you, and then they just bring it all the way up. And they're going to start heating it up. And by the way, since I got kicked off of Twitter, I've heard from a lot of people who don't have check marks, who don't have 50,000 followers, who have been kicked off for nothing. And you see the post that they were suspended for, it has nothing to do with anything. It has nothing to do with the election. And they say you're suspended for 3 days, 7 days, 10 days. They're coming for you. They came for Jones, we said nothing. They came for Gavin, we said nothing. They came for me. I'm definitely not Michael Knowles. Now I've got a mustache on Twitter. Some people said nothing. Some people raised a ruckus. They're going to march on, and they're going to keep censoring conservatives. And the American people know this, by the way. There's a Pew study out that shows that 72% of Americans believe that social media censors people based on their political views. 72%. That's not just conservatives. That's not just Republicans. That's the majority of people, the vast majority of people. Project Veritas, James O'Keefe's organization, showed that Twitter was shadow banning conservatives in just January of this year. A few other examples. Google, when you Google the California Republican Party, I think they've fixed it now, but when you Googled it, it used to list their ideology as Nazism. Oh, it was just a mistake, though, I'm sure. It was probably just a mistake. Who can, just a whoopsie daisy. Same thing with Google. When you would Google a new North Carolina state senator, a Republican state senator, the first photo that would come up called her a bigot. Just label it, just bigot right across it. And we've seen all of the bans. So they suspended me for not even telling the joke that they thought I was telling. They suspended James Woods for making a joke. They suspended Owen, Gavin, all of these other people. But on Facebook, it's not just Twitter conservative commentators. It's not just people who have talk shows or political podcasts or whatever. On Facebook, they banned major Catholic pages. So now we're moving outside the realm of just American conservatism. There was one called Jesus and Mary, 1.7 million followers on Facebook, kicked off. Catholic and Proud had 6 million followers on Facebook, kicked off. Well, there's a lot of overlap between Catholicism and conservative thought. There's a lot of overlap between the Christian internet and conservative internet. I think they might have reinstated one or both of those pages, but they kicked them off for a while. Conservative activist Grace Johnston, who's known as Activist Mommy on social media, she criticized Teen Vogue for encouraging its readers, young teenagers, for encouraging them to have very creative sex in places that you shouldn't have sex. And, it's a family show. I don't want to get too into detail here. But for talking about things that 12-year-olds shouldn't be talking about, 13-year-olds shouldn't be talking about, she criticized Teen Vogue. She was then kicked off of social media. Marsha Blackburn, running in Tennessee, she ran a pro-life ad on Twitter. Twitter said no, deleted the ad, nixed the ad, kicked it off. Facebook now censored Alveda King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s niece, censored her for running an ad for a pro-life movie that she was involved in, a movie about Roe versus Wade. Alveda King, that's not Gavin McInnes. That's not Alex Jones. That's Martin Luther King's niece, who's a pro-life activist. Prager University, obviously, is suing Google. They've been kicked off of Facebook for periods of time, had their videos censored because they talked about such controversial, outrageous topics as the 10 Commandments on YouTube. They had a series on the 10 Commandments censored. You couldn't see it at universities or at high schools. So just remember, you'll see this on social media today, on Facebook and on Twitter. The big headlines, big headers. It says, get out and vote. Don't forget to vote. Here's your polling place. Go register. They're not talking to you. They're not, trust me, they're not talking to you. They're talking to left-wingers that they want to go and get out to vote, but they don't want you to get out and vote. In fact, they don't even want you on their platforms. That's how you know that they're not talking to you, is they're censoring you and they're kicking you off right around an election. And they're deleting your Facebook pages and they're deleting your communities on there. So when they have these big campaigns, get out and vote, go to your polling place. The question that this raises is this election interference? If they are providing material support to get Democrat voters out there and vote, and if they are providing material support to kicking conservatives off of the platform, blocking them from seeing those resources, blocking them from getting their message out, is that election interference? There was a report that came in today that the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, has been pestering Twitter to delete conservative accounts and that Twitter has obliged. Not sure if this is true. I wish that I could get more verification before I report that, but Twitter never gives us verification on anything because this is the central problem of social media, is these big tech companies are totally opaque. They have no transparency at all. So are they providing material support to Democrats? Are they providing in-kind contributions to Democrats? Are they interfering in the election? And this is a question that should involve the FEC, because if they're giving support to Democrats and they're hurting Republicans in elections, they should have major election lawsuits filed against them. They should be regulated as political entities or as political publishers or whatever, but not as open platforms. That is how the social media treat the GOP. How do the mainstream media treat the GOP? This is a little gift. This was a Christmas comes early, election day gift came in. There's a guy named John James. He's running for Senate, and a reporter left him, he's a Republican, a reporter left him a voicemail to try to get an interview with John James. And she thought that she had hung up her phone once she finished the voicemail. She hadn't, so the James campaign still had the rest of this. And she starts to give her opinion to her colleague in the room while she thinks that the Republican is not listening. Here's the voicemail.
Hi, my name is Brenda Battle. I am a reporter with the Huron Daily Tribune in Bad Axe, Michigan. Looking to set up an appointment with Mr. James for sometime on Wednesday for a phone interview regarding the election results. If you'd like to call me back, my number is 989. Thank you.
Man, if he beats her, Jesus. John James. Whew. That would suck.
Effing John James. That would, I don't think it's going to happen, but almost comical. Almost like theatrical, like she's on stage, you know, it's like overwritten. If you had handed that screenplay in Hollywood, they'd say it's a little overwritten. It's a little overwrought. I don't know about that. But that is what you're dealing with. Nobody should be surprised by that. That's what reporters are. That's what journalists are, so-called journalists. I don't mean to smear all of them. There are a handful of good journalists, but not very many in this day and age. Most of them are political operatives for Democrats who despise the Republicans that they're covering and seek to undermine them every chance they get. We've got a lot more to get to, including the final argument moving into the midterm elections and whether that final argument is going to work from President Trump, from Rush Limbaugh, and from Abraham Lincoln. But first, I've got to say goodbye to Facebook and YouTube. If you're on those places, I'm amazed you haven't been kicked off. If you're on Daily Wire, thank you. You help keep the lights on in our Tora Bora cave over here. You keep Kofefe in my cup. Tune in tonight. We are going to be live starting at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for the Daily Wire Backstage Election Special. God King, Jeremy Boring, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Elisha Krause, and little old me will be covering all the latest election news as it happens. We will even be getting Twitter updates from our own Cassie Dillon and for some reason Colton Haas. I couldn't exactly tell you why. No, it should be very good. We're very happy to have Cassie and Colton both on in Elisha's Corner to give us election updates. You're not going to want to miss it. As always, only Daily Wire subscribers get to ask the questions. So make sure to subscribe today. Also, you know, it's $10 a month, $100 for an annual membership. You get me, the Andrew Klavan Show, the Ben Shapiro Show. You get Another Kingdom early, and you get to watch the whole thing. You get to ask questions in the mailbag. You get conversation. You get a ton of stuff now, actually. But this is what you get. The Leftist Tears Tumblr. Now, I'm aware that some watching and listening to this right now are watching and listening before the midterm elections. Some are listening after the midterm elections. I call this Schrodinger's tumbler because it could simultaneously be completely filled or completely empty. It is both at the same time right now as we are wondering which way the election is turning. Get your Schrodinger's tumbler immediately so that you can either bathe yourself in leftist tears or fill it up with your own tears, depending on how the midterms go. Go to dailywire.com. We'll be right back.